Let's begin with yesterday's attack in Paris on the satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. Now, the global hashtag Je suis Charlie is indeed taken over pretty much all of social media. It's available from the charliehebdo.fr website, and it's available in dozens of languages. And to recap, we had 10 staff members and editors, very famous cartoonists were killed, otherwise wounded. Their office had been firebombed 3 years prior. Their focus of the terror organizations now appears to be on these soft targets. You had 3 gunmen with a surgical attack, automatic weapons. They killed 2 responding police officers, and apparently a third has just died this morning because we taped this on Thursday for Friday broadcast.
I didn't know that.
And they were all attacked because of satire over the Prophet Muhammad, and it seemed to have caused quite a stir. Al-Qaeda in Yemen is claiming responsibility. So are there more of these to come, I guess, is where we start.
Just awful. I mean, the first thing to say is, we have all support, for the families and friends of those who died and been injured. As a journalist, I feel, I think, like all journalists around the world, a very real hurt by this, and it's a terrible, terrible thing to have happened. Especially on, after blinking cartoons, for goodness sake. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, almost nothing is off limits in terms of free speech. And that includes, I'm afraid to say, the Prophet Muhammad. I mean, if it offends people, so be it. I mean, and it's just an awful thing to kill people, murder people because of that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a kind of symbolic attack on freedom of expression and freedom of thought, really. I mean, if your ideology can't stand up to criticism or satire, if violence is the only thing you have rather than dialectic, then you need a more rigorous belief system, I think.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was reading several of the headlines as they came across late into the night last night, and of course the folks over at Fox News have gone the full Benghazi on this, and I really worry about this. I penned a piece last night that I popped up on UK Progressive Magazine about not just the issue of free speech, but really we seem to have lost our ability to engage in debate and discourse.
Yeah.
And for some reason, and it doesn't matter whether it's over the Muslim faith or the Islamic faith or the Christian faith or the Jewish faith or whatever, there seems to be a tremendous amount of thin-skinnedness. And I worry a little bit about there's an undercurrent to satire when it crosses into that religious line of almost professional atheism, for lack of a better word.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I absolutely agree. But I mean, it may or may not be funny, but that is separate to offending somebody, and it is only satire.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Phil on this, Dennis. I mean, I read your piece yesterday, and it's interesting that you use the word respect, and I think there's conflation of that word in many regards. So on the one hand, I'm an atheist, right? So I reserve the right to not respect your belief system because I'm an atheist. But I respect your right to practice your religion. And those two things are very different things, I think, and they get conflated.
Absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, I guess from the respect point of view, and I've watched this now since 9/11. I get very concerned when I see the very sharp right-wing bigots, whether they be in UKIP or BNP or the far-right Christians, that come out and they blame all Muslims for what happened yesterday, and the inability to separate the 99.999% of those who follow that particular faith. Because, literally sitting in the dentist office this morning, two women in veils came in, and they happened to be speaking in Dutch. So we had a long conversation in Dutch, which was their natural tongue in Cardiff, of all places. and it was just very strange. I wanted to know what it was like for them in the wake of something like this, and you know, they were at first reluctant to talk, but then they talked a little bit about how, yes, you know, people look at them with suspicion.
That's wrong. That is
And
wrong. I totally agree with that.
And I'm trying to find, you know, you talk about me conflating, and perhaps I did in the emotion of the moment. But my concern is, you know, what's happening to our humanity. And I think, you know, because I also had a conversation with our guest for next week, Andy Chiba, from the Welsh Green Party, over this same issue of, you know, how he and his contention was that, you know, most of the radicalized Muslims start out as centrists. And I thought, well, that's a bridge too far. And I don't know what the answer is. That's why I wanted to have this discussion today.
I agree with you. But, you know, there are fundamentals here, and one of the and I know this is trite, but two wrongs do not make a right. No. It is wrong to tar all Muslims in that vein, and it is wrong to be offended and to use the gun in this appalling way because of cartoons. These two things are wrong.
And the thing is as well, Dennis, when you're talking about the BNP and the far right, or the kind of not so far right perhaps of UKIP and their bigoted opinions, surely again, if we do believe in free speech, we have to hear those bigoted opinions so we can argue them down. We can't say don't talk because we don't like what you're saying.
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's a fundamental thing. Freedom of speech is a fundamental, and I totally agree with you. I personally find those views obnoxious, but I support their right to say them, you know. And this isn't the same in any way, but when I wrote a piece for Wales Eye in relation to the Welsh language, I got a huge amount of abuse, or the website got a huge amount of abuse over this. This isn't the same. No. And this is a piece in support of the Welsh language, but I had the audacity, or we had the audacity, to include the views of people who did not support the Welsh language and did not think their taxes should be spent in supporting it. Now, I don't happen to agree with that. I don't agree with those views, but they have a right to those views.
Well, I guess my concern and the use of the word respect comes from the very polarized nature of the last 10 years, the way all discussions have come. You're either with us or you're against us. It started with Bush. If you're either with us, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists.
But that must be resisted, Dennis. That has to be resisted.
Yeah, because I mean, I got jumped on when I was on not Sharp End, but the Wales Eye. Not Wales Eye. The original one. You know, and I happened to raise that same issue of concern from others about, you know, why, if so few members of the population are speaking that language, and boy, this guy launched into me with all barrels blazing, and it kind of took me back, the amount of misguided passion.
But you should be allowed to say these things. I mean, a parallel, for example, is when I went to the Hay Festival a few years ago, and Christopher Hitchens was speaking about that there were, in effect, he was saying that there are fundamentals, and you know, it is wrong to use the cover of religion to do things like political mutilation. But you know what? But what I'm saying is that, and he was shouted down. No, he wasn't shouted down. But there was a woman in the audience who accused him of being a racist, and he absolutely went for her. And rightly so. Yeah. This is not racism.
It's not, but you know what the interesting thing is that, you know, and I know you mentioned, Dario, and we'll come to you in 1 second about the fact that your atheism gives you the ability to say, no, I don't respect your particular religion, but I give you the idea, to give you the ability to say that, you know, no matter what you feel, no matter what I feel. What I see happening with like a Christopher Hitchens, for example, who, you know, good friend, I like him very much, is that he's taken atheism and almost created a dogma and a religion around it.
But
so you say
my answer to that, right, is that Chris Hitchens, God rest his soul, if he has one, is that we've had centuries, millennia of religious bigotry, and a few books the God delusion, and they're accused of militant atheism.
Yeah.
We've had the Spanish Inquisition and forced conversion of African people.
Yeah.
And then suddenly people stand up and write books and say, "Well, I'm an atheist. I don't think it's right," and they're accused of being a militant atheist.
I mean, if Christopher Hitchens and the rest of the kind of new atheist brigade were saying religion should be banned, and because secular scientific reason is the be-all and end-all, then I would agree with you. But none of them, from what I've read of their books, none of them are saying that, and they are very critical of, the notion of religious faith taking precedence over scientific reason and religious faith being implemented into government policy. And I'm, again, in agreement with that also. And this is not a new debate at all. The separation of church and state is enshrined in the Constitution, of course, of America, although you probably wouldn't know that at certain times. And I think also there is definitely a difference in the way that, say, between France and the United Kingdom in the way that it has dealt with Islam specifically. I think France has definitely been much more confrontational. You have things like the burqa laws, for example, and I think Charlie Hebdo is an example of a magazine that has directly attacked terrorism and religion and Islam itself using these satirical cartoons. But again, these are satirical cartoons. If we live in a world where your belief, your understanding of the world cannot be questioned using, a cartoon, a satirical, rhetorical way of criticizing, then, we really are going backwards, in my view.
Dad, where do you stand, Dario, on that issue of separation of church and state? And, it's a far more rigorous, as you indicated, in relation to the French way of doing things and secularism. And it's enshrined in law. I think it's enshrined in law there, and enshrined in law in America. Britain is a bit more fuzzy.
Yeah, to say the least.
Supporters of that say, well, it works, but it's a bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
But in France, particularly, there is a very rigorous separation of things. And, for example, in schools, you aren't allowed, I think I'm right in saying, to wear religious symbols,
No, that's right.
So where do you stand on that? Is that the way to go then?
Well, for me, it is. I'm much more supportive. I mean, for example, take the issue of faith schools. I don't see how you can set up an educational system that you can define as inclusive and based on liberal secular values, if that's what we're saying our country is. I know there's an argument to say we're a culturally Christian country, and I think that's absolutely right. But if we are a secular democracy, how can you have faith schools that are basing their whole philosophy, their whole understanding of the world on a particular religious belief that for me automatically has to, in enshrining itself as being the right way of thinking, automatically then has to say that other ways of thinking are incorrect, are not right, and therefore are against our way of thinking.
I think I'm with you on that.
So I mean, I am totally for the teaching of religion in school in a kind of cultural, historical way.
So separation.
Separation, totally. In my view, and I'm not talking just about Islam here. I mean, I think that there shouldn't be priests and vicars and what have you in the House of Lords.
No, I'm with you. Dennis, what about you? Where do you come on that?
Well,
are you the fuzzy mode?
I am very fuzzy at the moment. I mean, I grew up in a very religious household. I've moved away from my faith. I'm not sure that I can consider myself to be completely atheist. There are moments where, I still feel that there is something other than us out there, but that's my own personal belief.
But in America, it is that strange situation where it is enshrined in law, and yet it is a very religious
it's ignored.
country.
Yet they try to find ways around it every way they possibly can. So I think a person's faith is their business and their business alone. And if you cannot be in a situation of tolerance of at least the existence of others, and this is my issue.
I agree with you, but I'm also of the view that tolerance should extend to people like me and Dario, i.e. atheists.
Absolutely.
But hang on a minute, Dennis. But I haven't said anything that says nobody can not practice their religion. Religion should be taught in schools in a particular kind of way. There should be total and utter acceptance of people's ability and rights to practice that religion.
Absolutely, Dario. I'm not suggesting that you or anybody else was saying otherwise. What I'm saying is that, yes, I do get offended when I walked into primary school when my children were there, and there were these basically church services going on for all the parents there, no matter what their faith was. So that did rub me the wrong way, because it seemed to show a lack of tolerance, a lack of respect for the fact that there are others.
You'd be of the view that, in effect, you belong to a Christian, in inverted commas, society. Do you?
Well, I'm living in a nation governed in theory by the Church of England, where the Queen is indeed the titular head of the church. Absolutely. Yet, I see most Church of England and Church of Wales schools starting to move away from that rather doctrinaire point of view. I mean, if I look at what my kids are studying in comprehensive school, I mean, they are studying what's going on in the Bhagavad Gita. They are studying a lot of traditions across the board. So it's not just spoon-fed Christianity. Because the other thing I've noticed is that people go to church in this nation as children, and then the minute they graduate from primary school, they never grace the doors of a church again because they've been so indoctrinated in a way that is offensive to them.